I've been really looking forward to this because you have such a great description of what you do and so much richness on your website and everything. You call yourself an anthropologist, consultant, writer, and the multipotentialite within you. You've managed to make that work somehow. So I'd love to get into some of that. But yeah, to start with, just a bit of your background and story would be lovely.
Oh,
you know,
God.
those sort of,
How much time have we got?
yeah, I mean, it's always a big question, isn't it?
Right, right. Especially with multi-potentialites, it's like I feel that we're born into it. And from my experience, I mean, I'm 50. I've spent my entire life trying to figure this stick out because we're not taught this. You know, it's almost like if they could do a DNA test on us, you know, as soon as we come out of the room and say, "Oh, you're a multipotentialite, here's your owner's manual, off you go." But we're within this societal model that doesn't recognize, and because they don't recognize people like us, we're almost, well, I wouldn't say almost, but they do exclude people like us.
Yeah.
Because, you know, but from an anthropological point of view, I kind of get it. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent already.
I love it. Yeah.
There is something about labeling that allows us to feel safe because as a human, well, mammals, period, you know, it's either safe or it's unsafe. There's risk or there's no or minimal risk. And in labeling something as such, well, then you know how to react. And if you can label something, then you know whether it's safe or unsafe. So I feel that that's part of the root behind the labeling and being able to put people and things into a labeled box, is that we know what to expect. It tempers our expectations about safety and risk. For those of us who kind of defy labeling, then I think that taps into an almost primal sense of risk with other human beings. Because if I can't label you, then are you safe? I don't know what you are.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. So I don't know. That's kind of what I've come up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's categorization of which category do you fall into, and then I know how to relate to that and respond to you and all of that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very evolutionary psychology, evolutionary anthropological perspective, but grain of salt.
Yeah. And in terms of the multipotentialism in you and those different strands, your different passions and interests and that kind of thing, like maybe what are some of those and how have you come to smush them together, I suppose? Like, yeah, because there's different ways of doing that.
Yeah, this is something I struggled with for quite a while. You know, you kind of get to a certain age and you're like, okay, you know, what's important to me? What are my values? And I came to that point just before COVID. And so COVID allowed me the space and time to really delve into that. And that's when I really kind of came face to face with my multipotentialism. It's like, okay, well, what do I do with that? Especially if I want to present myself into the public space. Because again, you know, going back to that label, well, you know, what is my label or my brand going to be in that public space? Because, you know, that's part of what branding is. What are you known for? You know, like Brene Brown is known for her work on shame. Okay, she's got her label. I'm sure that's not the only thing she studies, you know, whatever, but that's what she's known for. That's her brand. So coming into the public space, anybody who wants to do that, you have to figure out your brand or your label. And for a multipotentialite, that's really difficult. I mean, I don't know about you, Andy, but I mean, everything interests me.
Yeah.
I am all over the place. It's bring something new into my sphere. It's like, oh, that's so cool. Tell me about that. What is that about? And you just dive right in. So, and I think that's something about anthropology too. It's a very broad discipline. And archaeology is one of 4 subfields of the anthropological discipline. And so even explaining that kind of blows people's brains. So that's why on my website, I've taken the label as anthropologist instead of archaeologist, because another subfield of anthropology is physical or biological anthropology. So already, I got 2 subdisciplines within the field of anthropology. People understand archaeology. They don't know what the hell anthropology is, but I felt it was better to go broad than not. And then, wanting to reach out and help people, like this was just such a journey. And I feel it's still evolving, because when I put that up on my website, which was probably about 3 years ago, it was all archaeology. And I was like, well, I'm not just an archaeologist. Like, how do I explain that to, like, where does my writing go? Because I've released 2 books. Like, is that a whole other brand? Do I have to develop a pen name? Like, that's just a lot of work. Even just thinking about that was a lot. So fast forward to where we are now, 3-4 years in the future. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that my brand is me. I am all of these things. And even the anthropology consultant writer, that's not the end of story. It's just the tip of the iceberg. But at least I hope that gives a representation of the depth and breadth of who I am. So that's kind of the conclusion that I came to, is how to represent me as a brand rather than what I do or my product as a brand. It's me. Who am I? And those core values that we were just talking about, the integrity, which is very important to you in your podcast, is also very important to me in my podcast. Those core values, that's a through line through everything I do. And that's something that I concentrate on more than what I do or what I produce. It's more of how I do it with integrity, the authenticity, focusing on the individual, the uniqueness of who we are, embracing the weirdness. Those core values, that's who I am. And so that's my brand. So it's kind of a roundabout answer to your question.
Yeah, that's great. A great sort of opening of the door into, all sorts of potential corridors to explore. And I love that idea of, it's the how more than the what. That's something I very much relate to, and something I've been exploring in relation to art, and the way that you can often tell that if something has been created by a particular artist, especially if you're familiar with their work, and even if it is totally different from something that they've done, it might be a different medium or just a different style that they're trying out. There's often it's that sound that comes through, whether it's a metaphorical sound or a literal sound in a musician, that just speaks to that integrity, that integration of they're creating from that authentic place, from that the howness of them and the whyness of them probably as well, rather than simply the what. And what you said really resonates with me about do all those disparate elements. Do I have to create a whole different brand for that and a whole different platform for this? And this has been massive for me over the years with with my music, like where does music fit with this other stuff that I'm doing, and the podcast and the coaching and personal development stuff, and yeah, kind of find ways to make that work in different guises, I suppose. And one of the things that really struck me about I guess it's a bridge between, or like a symbolic and literal. It's like a metaphor and a literal image, is that of digging. And so you've found that cornerstone that combines different elements of what you do. And so you've got the digging as an archaeologist, and the metaphorical digging that you do with people, helping people dig for themselves. So I'd love to explore that image. What does it mean to dig?
I don't even know when that kind of popped into my brain. It was probably around the time that I published my first book, Memoirs of a Reluctant Archaeologist, because I thought, there's the reluctance because Elise, my alter ego, is a physical anthropologist, but yet she's forced into an archaeological job looking for rocks when all she wants to do is look for dead people and work with dead people. So she's, having to take up this job that she doesn't really want to do. She's not invested in it. So she's reluctantly doing it. But at the same time, there is that metaphorical, she's being caused to dig into her own psyche and her own junk and what actually is going on. And actually, since, coming up with that image, that metaphorical image of digging through and excavating, I've seen that come up with people talking about excavating their own psychology or history or whatever to find the gunk, you throw it out, or find the gems and bring those forward. And it felt like my own time in archaeology that it was a time of really excavating down to who I was, figuring out who I was, what I wanted in life. What did I need to clear out so that I could bring those internal gems forward.
Love that. Yeah. And what are some of those gems that you've found?
Switching to a strengths-based model rather than the weakness-based model that is prevalent in our society, and it's also very prevalent in academia. I work in an academic environment, because I went through and got my master's. I was in an academic environment for a long time. That always looking at your strengths as some place that you need to improve on. You're not good because you have weaknesses. And don't focus on your strengths. Your weaknesses are where you need to improve on. And it just seemed like you're always in a state of stress and catch up and never good enough. And it really engages this sense of low self-worth. You're never good enough, which reinforces that imposter syndrome. And yeah, I felt all of that in archaeology. And I had an inkling that I was highly sensitive before I got into archaeology, but it wasn't really talked about. There was only the Elaine Aron book, Highly Sensitive People, or Highly Sensitive. I can't remember the name of the book, but Elaine Aron, she kind of started it all, I think, back in the 80s or 90s or whatever. And, did the checklist, thought, oh yeah, that's cool, whatever, moving on. Didn't really know what to do with that information. And then once I left archaeology and I saw just how burnt out, I was so burnt out, I had adrenal fatigue. It was a physical state of exhaustion. Crawling to the bathroom 20 feet away was an effort. I actually had thoughts of, do I really need to go to the bathroom? Like, is it worth it? because I can't move. I got no energy. That's how bad it was. Um, taking a handful of painkillers every day because of abdominal cramps and migraines. Gained weight, going down that path of depression. There were so many indicators, and I thought, okay, this isn't just a workload issue. Again, it isn't just the what, it's the how. So it was the how I was having to do my work as an archaeologist. The constantly having to interact with people, having to account for myself, having to, the 9 to 5, and it wasn't just 9 to 5, it was like 7 to 8 at night, the 12 to 14 hour days, it was just too much. I was in a constant state of overwhelm. And that took me to past rock bottom sort of thing. And so I really had to figure out what was it that was not working so that I could excavate and throw out. And who was I so that I could tap into that and bring myself out. And it was a lot. It was really difficult. And I think for those people who are highly sensitives and we get into these situations, because we don't have that owner's manual, because we live in a societal framework that does not acknowledge us, does not give us the tools, the information, and forget the leverage to help us, to support us. It's a learning journey to figure out what we need. And so, I came to really embrace high sensitivity, multipotentialism, neurodiversity as strengths. And I'm still kind of figuring that out. Okay, what is it? What does it look like in me? And what do I need to bring that out?
Yeah, that's great. That speaks to. So I was watching the international conference on sensitivity research that was held last week. So that was from the University of Surrey. So there's a bunch of highly sensitive researchers involved in it, including Elaine Aron and Michael Plewis, who does a lot. And they were talking about this need to shift to seeing sensitivity through a sort of a core functional lens, and like the traits around sensitivity as core functions as opposed to dysfunctions. So almost how we would often frame it as against normative modes of being and what we would expect as the normal way of being, and therefore highly sensitive people are sort of dysfunctional in comparison to that. At least that's how I understood it. It was a lot of academic language that was like going way over my head. But that kind of made sense and speaks to what you just were saying about, the coming at it as strengths or as core parts of the way the nervous system is wired, and the way that, biological sensitivity actually sits as its own thing, as opposed to being something's gone wrong. It's like, no, this is, this is the trait is real and found in 30% or 20 to 30% of beings across species. So it's like, it is a core function. And I found that a really helpful reminder, because it's like, oh no, then you've got something to work with from a position of strength, as opposed to purely coping or adapting to a world that's not necessarily made for highly sensitive people.
Well, it's like saying that because I'm a woman, I'm dysfunctional because I'm not a man.
Yeah.
That was our perspective in the medical system for centuries. Women are the abnormal form of men.
Yes.
And again, I think it's the labeling thing. not just a human thing, it's a mammalian thing to know what is safe and what isn't. What is different is unsafe because it's not part of our group of known similarity it's not like us. We know that we're safe because we live with us. And, usually when you're with somebody else, they have a lot of the same traits as you because you view that as safe. When they don't have the same traits as you, then you're unsafe. And so that comes with the whole, it's interesting that we start off with the labeling thing right at the beginning, because I mean, from an anthropological perspective, that's what I'm seeing. And so, yeah, the whole sensitivity thing, it's just a shift in the perspective and a shift in how we're viewing. I mean, everything is still the same. It's all still out there. But are we viewing it as safe or unsafe? Or are we viewing it as a abnormality and normality, or normal, abnormal? I don't know.
Yeah. Something to fix or something to befriend and get to know and to, actually make work in its own right.
It's just a facet of being a human, period, full stop. We've got a lot of variation in our species. Get used to it.
Yes. I'd love to, when we were sending some emails back and forth talking about this, you sent a great paragraph about, which it really speaks to gentle rebellion, which I hope you don't mind me kind of reading out.
But there's only a typo in there. It should be with a sigh of relief instead of a sign of relief.
Okay, I'll try and remember that as I read it. But you wrote, I guess I'm a bit of a rebel because I'm a multipotentialite. People in my discipline, physical or biological anthropology, don't know what to do with me because I'm more of a field person and have done archaeology. Archaeologists don't understand me because I like dead people, hence I'm a reluctant archaeologist. Scientists don't understand me because I write creatively and am equally an artist. And academics find me way too involved with project management and business. I don't fit into anyone's neat little box. When they assign me a label, with a sigh of relief, I then say or do something contrary to their expectations, causing them to be shocked and dumbfounded. I love this because it was like there's real gentle rebellion, like just oozing through it. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of highly sensitive people who will relate to that and push back against labels, as we talked about. Maybe because it's like they find labels claustrophobic and a little bit inhibiting, or simply because they just aren't easy to categorize, maybe a bit of both. And I'm intrigued like how you find that, because reading that I was like there's an enjoyment that I pick up on, like there's a sense of you own that, but I wonder how you find that state of being as well. Do you ever wish you were more definable and easy to label?
I think if you had asked me that even just 10 years ago, I would have said, it'd make life easier, because rebelling against labels, whether you reject them outright or you try to encompass multiple labels or a label that's not easily taken up or acknowledged by society, that's going against the grain, and that can be tough. Swimming against the tide, that's just effort all the way. And for highly sensitives, effort, we got to watch the effort. It can be draining. And then pretty soon, we're on the floor wondering whether or not we really do need to go to the bathroom. But now, I'm not only am I okay with it, I do find I kind of chuckle sometimes. It's like I can see when people I've been contrary in their eyes, and they're just kind of like they'll take a step back and they'll just like, huh? And I'm just like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah.
And I can see that I'm not fitting in their box. I'm not aligning with their perceived expectation, whether they're conscious of it or not. And you know what? I've had friends for 10, 20 years that I can still shock because they have developed, for some reason or other, they have developed an expectation of me, and then I'll go do something that is authentic to me. It was unseen or hidden until then. And then they'll go, whoa, where did that come from? It's like, oh, I'm just, being me.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Oh yeah, I kind of revel in it now. Whereas before, I think I'm more aware of what's going on now. Whereas before, the risk of being exiled from the tribe, so to speak, was a little bit more weighty. Now it's just like, whatever. I don't care anymore. I'm getting too old for this.
Yeah. So in times gone by, would that fear of the exiling be something that stopped you from doing things you'd have wanted to do?
Oh yeah. Big at masking. I think you and all the audience can relate to that. Yeah. I'm great at masking, or just, sitting in my corner, watching the house party or the crowd or the conference or what have you, you're just sitting back and watching everybody. Because then I don't have to mask because I'm not performing for anybody. Yeah. Sit there being myself in the corner. But yeah, then doing that, if you are interacting with somebody voluntarily or involuntarily, then it's that hyper vigilance. You got your radar on full, taking in all the cues, verbal and nonverbal, about what this person's expectations may be. Oh, I can see they're attempting to put me in that box. They're attempting to assign that label. So, do I want to rebel against that now, or do I just let it slide and fulfill that expectation? And then all the juggling starts, and that's when the effort kicks in. And then, 20 minutes in, I'm suddenly drained, and that's it. I'm going home.
Man, you described that process so perfectly there. I don't think I'd thought about that. The scanning for the boxes or the categories that you're being put into within a conversation, within that sort of encounter, and then the thought process of like, do I want to rebel against that now? Or will I just conform to that and just, probably go against my own better judgment and like, I guess it's that masking aspect, pretend to be something or pretend to be more of something that I'm only a little bit of, or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily a conscious process and that it takes time. Like what I just went through could be over in a flash.
Yeah.
But over the years, becoming more and more conscious of who I am and how I'm interacting in situations, and then doing the post-mortem deconstruction afterwards, like, okay, what happened there? How am I feeling? How did I feel before? What happened during that that may be related to how I'm feeling? Sometimes the overanalysis paralysis, you can make that work for you. Sometimes, it is just paralysis, but you can make that work for you so that you can break down, hopefully, what happened and why it happened. So you can get the figure out why you are the way you are feeling now. Okay, I'm really drained right now. What just happened? I was feeling fine 10 minutes ago. Or you get home and you're just stoked. Okay, what happened? Who did I run into? We talked about. Well, that's what we talked about. Yeah, I remember that. That was awesome. I need to follow up and get some more of that. And it carries you for 3 days afterwards. So, kind of going back to hitting rock bottom with archaeology and finding out really doing the postmortem on that to figure out why I hit bottom and how I got there and how I was going to dig myself out. Well, part of digging yourself out is finding out what gives you the fuel, that buzz. I just listened to another one of your episodes and you talk about that buzz, that glorious high almost. And I would get that a lot from writing, from being in the zone. And that's one thing that I lost when I was in archaeology because I didn't have the time or the space to really go into that creative mindset where you can get into the zone and time just slips by and you've got all these things percolating in your brain and you're in the act of creation and it's bliss. And it felt like a drug high to me. And I wanted more of that. And I was pretty desperate for it. And so I really started to look at what else gave that to me. You know, if I want to get that from writing, well, what else gives that to me? Because maybe that'll lead me back to writing. So yeah, there's a lot of deconstruction and figuring out how I interact with the world.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, and that's sort of because there's what you want to move away from, I suppose, and then there's what you want to move towards, and that kind of speaks to what you're talking about with the strengths and weaknesses. Like if you're and I'd love to know why you think that academic environment focuses so much on weaknesses and not strengths. But yeah, it's that if all you're focusing on is getting better and what I'm not good enough at, and I need to, I suppose move away from that to something better, then that's exhausting. But if you're actually recognizing, no, these are my strengths. These are the things that give me a buzz. These are the things I've moved towards in the past. And actually, when you focus on your weaknesses, you sort of ignore those things and you ignore that arena of the buzz where the stuff that brings you to life sits.
I think you've hit on a couple really key things there, Andy. It's that doing your weaknesses drain you. It takes you also away from you. Your strengths are who you are.
Yeah.
And very often they will give you the buzz. So they're bringing you towards you, who you are, and you're getting refueled by that. Whereas the weaknesses are taking you away from you and draining you. Yeah. Wow. You've hit it right there.
You've clarified it perfectly. Yeah.
Oh no, I think you've solved the universe's problems right there.
Yeah. And what is that about the academic environment that does skew in that direction?
Oh, I don't know. It's always been like that for as long as I've seen it and I've experienced it. Maybe it comes from the whole imposter syndrome that you're constantly going up this academic ladder of prestige. You always want more recognition, more credit. You're never reaching the top in academia. There's always something else that you have to do, something else, somebody else you have to collaborate, some other class you have to teach. Like it's just never good enough. So maybe it's just a natural breeding ground for weakness-based perspective. Yeah, I don't know. I can't answer that.
Yeah. So I suppose, you kind of maybe keys into an ego part where it's like, I can't be weak or I need to be better. And also the external demands on you to be constantly outperforming your past self. And I'm sure that translates to other areas as well.
I do in my full-time real job. I work a lot with researchers, and I think that's where it really started to come out to me that the self-worth low self-worth, imposter syndrome, and weakness-based perspective is just endemic in academia.
Right.
And trying to shift people's perspective from, you know what, stop trying to please everybody by sitting on all these committees and doing all this service work and, you know, answering student emails at midnight. No wonder you're drained within 3 years of tenure track. Duh. Switch that up. What are you good at? What do you want to do? You've just spent, you know, at least 10 years in your academic program, post-secondary academic program. You must have done it for a reason. There's a passion there. There's a fuel there. Tap into that. And so everything extraneous will start to drift away, and you'll start to find fuel again. You'll start to find passion again. But yeah, getting people to shift that perspective is different. It seems like, you know, there might be a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's really, really far away, and they're not too sure if they can get there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You know,
That
put it out there, sow the seed.
Yeah. It's just always see sort of a mental image of that light at the end of the tunnel, almost being your strengths that you've moved so far away from, and in order to get back to that, you've got to go through the weeds of your weaknesses. And actually, maybe there's another light at this end of the tunnel, which is right next to you, and that's your strengths. Yeah. And this kind of resonates with the question. You say your favorite question is why, and I think that speaks to, you know, I guess those conversations you might be having with people, like, you know, what is that why that gave you that sort of fuel? What fueled the fire in your heart to bring you to this point in the first place? And I'm just curious about, you know, why is your favorite question why? Why do you love to ask why?
Why are you asking me this, Andy? I don't know. I feel that so much can be uncovered by asking why. You know, anytime somebody wants me to follow a process, well, why? What is the objective of this process? Why did you create this process? What is the spirit behind this process? Maybe it's because I've worked in, you know, a bureaucratic environment. You know, that's exactly what post-secondary is. It's just a bureaucracy. So always asking why, because processes are usually developed to answer a why. We need to do something. So let's develop this process. Okay, well, sometimes the process can develop and go off on a tangent. And so you need to get back to why you developed it in the first place. It was to solve this issue. Laws, too, at least in Canada, you know, sure, you can be charged with the technicality, but the spirit of the law is to address something. And so, you know, if you get to the stage of court, often it'll come back to, well, the spirit of the law is X, but you were charged with a technicality. But even if you were breaking the law, but to get to the spirit, then, you know, maybe it's such that we need to relanguage that legislation so that it ensures that it's still attending to that spirit. So I find that the why really gets down to the root of what's going on, and it helps us excavate down to that root.
There's that digging again. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's so true. And yeah, I really like, because one of the things I'm always looking for is different ways to ask why, because sometimes why it can put people on the defensive, or, you know, it can feel a bit accusatory or blamey.
Yeah.
Like, why did you do that? But like, even then, as you were going through some of those, the whys that you were just asking, there was what is the spirit of the law? Like that is actually a reframing of a why. What brought you here in the first place? How does this reflect your values? What caused you to do that? When did this start changing? Mm-hmm. That sort of thing kind of gets to a why, helps to dig through that. And right. And I think even just the sort of scrutinizing our, and again, that's quite a harsh word, but thinking about why we think things as well is such an important part of, critical thinking that is missing in a lot of areas of society, I feel, at the moment, where you kind of have a conversation with someone and they can't really tell you why they would take a particular position. And I think this is where, high sensitivity has a real role at a collective level, is being able to do that excavating and do it gently without sort of backing people into corners and things, but just having those conversations about, okay, well, what is it about that position that speaks to you? Or like, what caused you to take that view on that particular issue or whatever it might be? And I think a lot of the time we don't actually know. And that's a really helpful process to go through in terms of, no, actually, I probably don't think that now that I think about it. But I've just absorbed a story, or I've absorbed something from, or not changed my mind, not rethought about it. Maybe it's a process, as you were saying, a process that had a purpose 10 years ago, and it was there to solve a problem. And I've just kept on doing it because I haven't thought about why it's no longer necessary or whatever. So I don't know if anything there speaks to you and you have anything to speak to.
Yeah, I think it's not just the why and asking how we think, that critical thinking piece, which I think you're bang on about, that it's come into disuse in current society. But it's also, if you're a high sensitivity, if you're a feeler, and like my process is usually I'll come away from something drained or buzzed or neutral. Okay, well, why do I feel like this? And it in its own, I don't know if it transcends thinking, or if it's that the subliminal, like underneath the thinking. I don't know if it's a level or whatever, but then trying to figure out why I feel like that, and then to articulate it, really helps me understand myself so that I can then prepare myself in future situations. So I find the why not just in how I'm thinking, but how I'm feeling has really changed my level of self-awareness and how I interact with the world. That's been revolutionary to me.
That's great. Yeah. And when you talk about sort of articulating it, is that something that you express verbally, or do you have a way of coming into contact with those feelings?
Usually it's through writing, but sometimes I'll have to, it's not coming. So, that's, when you pick up the lifeline, you dial one of your numbers, like, okay, I'm feeling this. This is what happened, and I'm feeling this, and I don't know what's going on. And so, that person's that knows you really well, really deeply, whether they've known you for 6 months or 16 years, whichever, then usually, even if they start hunting around and they don't have a direct answer, then hearing that, I don't know, it somehow accesses a different part of your brain. And then that will help me process in a different way, get me out of thinking ruts or whatever, and help me find new words, better words. Sometimes they'll hit on something. It's like, yeah, that word that you just said. They'll also help cut through the dissonance, because usually the way I'm feeling, it's because it set up a dissonance. So, like, what you were saying with you're thinking some way, but then you realize that you're just parroting somebody else. You're just regurgitating stuff, but you don't find that until there's something in you that feels dissonant.
Yeah.
Because it's like your body recognizes that what you're saying isn't true with who you are. And so you say something or you think something, your body says, WTF. And then you go, okay, something's off here. What's going on? And so, yeah, often that dissonance will cause me down the pathway of, okay, something's going on here.
Yeah.
What is that? I need to figure that out because I won't be able to sleep well until I figure this out. So yeah, sometimes free writing, journaling, and just allowing myself the freedom to just write down garbage, just get it out of my head. Sometimes it'll take me 2-3 pages, 2-3 days of free writing, 2-3 weeks of free writing until I get down to, oh, that's what that is. So it's almost like you've got to slough off, the garbage, the algae on the top of the pond until you get into the good stuff, skim off the scum until you get down to the good stuff. It's like, oh, that's what that is. And you'll know it when you hit it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah. Kind of speaks to something. Recently we were talking in the Haven about kind of naming feelings and especially for, it seems to be prevalent for highly sensitive people who have maybe done a lot of people pleasing and quick to appease other people. Like there's something really vulnerable, even if you're just doing it on your own, about actually verbalizing a feeling that might speak to something like that. But when you were talking about that, yeah, kind of coming to that place of, okay, this is the dissonance. This is the source of the dissonance. It can be that sort of thing. And it's those things that maybe at one level, you need to name, but the idea of going there is still like, no, there's a resistance to it. And it might take 2 or 3 weeks, but eventually it's like, no, that did.
Or sometimes there's just, there's layers on top of it.
Yeah.
And you've got to dig through those. You can't see it
until you've dug through the layers. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You really do have to do some excavation. And you know what? I get the vulnerability that you have to be, you're facing yourself, and that can be scary stuff. But for me, I really cannot sleep. I will be in a state of constant agitation until I can figure out the source of that dissonance. So for me, I don't have a choice but to become raw and vulnerable so that I can find that source, excavate it, rectify it, and move on.
And what does the dissonance turn into to harmony? Do you get a sense of harmony when you've gone through that process?
I don't know if it's harmony. It's kind of like if you were to run your finger around a glass and it makes that hum, that's the dissonance. When I figured that out, the hum stops.
Like peace, silence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I can go look for the harmony.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Oh, time has just absolutely zipped on.
Right?
It's crazy. Have you got a minute just to answer like a
absolutely
final question? Yeah. I love again talking about flow and just getting into it. Yeah, beautiful. So yeah, I'm always curious, like, what would you say to your younger self by way of advice, encouragement, or assurance as she navigated the road ahead of her?
Oh boy. Without setting up a time paradox.
Yeah, don't worry about that part. Yeah.
You're perfect just as you are. Don't let anybody else tell you any differently. Just be you, and it will get better.
Nice. Yeah. Would she have been accommodating?
Oh, she'd completely blown me off.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Who is this crazy old woman? Why is she trying to tell me what to do with my life? What the hell?
That's great. Yeah, and the final one is, if you could click your fingers and change one thing about the world right now, what would you choose?
I would love if critical thinking became the fashion again. I mean, it's lovely to hear you say that, Andy, because, yeah, I mean, I look at my social feeds, not every day, but whenever I, choose to look at them, and like, why can't we just think? Like, just think about what you're saying and doing, or what you're proposing on doing. Can we just stop and think, please?
So much. Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Oh, man. Well, Yvonne, this has been so nice. If people have, been listening and want to connect with you, where's the best place for them to do that? And what what is it that you can offer them, if anything?
Oh boy. We could do more of this. So please do feel free to reach out. Even if you just want to chat, there's not enough of this communication, especially with the highly sensitive, intuitive types out there, and enlarging our networks, knowing that you are part of an existing tribe, I think goes a long way to countering some of that isolation and depression. Yeah. So feel free to reach out. As Andy said, I do have a website, YvonneKjorlien.com. There's a contact page there. I'm also on Facebook, ReluctantArcheologist.com, Instagram, and both of those platforms are used mostly for the anthropological stuff. So, if you don't like dead people, then maybe that's not for you. So, and I do have a newsletter, which is a little bit more across all three spectrums, the anthropology, the art, and then just me being me. So you can sign up for the newsletter and get the insider information.
Alluring. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'll link to all of those in the show notes as well. Thank you, Yvonne.
This has been such a privilege and a pleasure, Andy. Thank you for this.